Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Sunday morning. The fellas already looking towards next week's slate as you have one of the biggest games you'll see in the college football season. Penn State heading on the road to play Ohio State. This game's been circled since the summer. And Dill, I think you're going to get similar vibes to what you saw with Oregon and Washington. Just two legitimate top teams in college football, national title contenders going to battle. Now, it might look a little different in terms of play style, but these are two of the best teams that you see across the country. Really excited to get into some of these matchups. Now, before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys, and especially the Big Ten fans. You all know we love talking this Big Ten conference. The amount of support you guys have shown the boys truly does mean a lot. So if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, I'm going to kick it off with this. The narrative that you're Marvin Harrison Jr., Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, Drew Allen, you're going to hear a lot of offensive players be talked about throughout this week. The story of this game, though, is both of these defenses are some of the best units that you see in the country. And I think whatever team wins this game, it's going to be on the backs of the elite defense that both of these teams have.
And that's frankly been the two units that have been really dominant consistently all year. And you've seen moments where both offenses have been really good, and there's kind of a top line. I think
yes,
neither have reached at a consistently enough yet, but the defenses, they've been there week in and week out and have obviously just, again, like two teams that have been very dominant this season in their respective defenses.
I think that's a really good point. I think like both of these offenses have really high ceilings. I don't know if you've seen either of these offenses kind of like reach that ceiling consistently this year, and this would be the game where you want to put it together on the offensive side of the ball. Dill, I want to start with the Ohio State offense and what we've seen from them. And what I'm asking for, and you could say this for Penn State too, I think you have really two talented quarterbacks. For Ohio State specifically, I think it's time to give Kyle McCord the keys to the car. Like Ryan Day has consistently wanted to run the football, and they've been okay at it at best. But you look at where the playmakers are, and you're talking about a big game between two top 10 teams. You have to utilize those playmakers. And I'm looking for Ryan Day to let Kyle McCord be that quarterback and go get it to the wide receivers like guys like Marvin Harrison Jr., because that's kind of how I see Ohio State winning this football game.
Well, and that's the thing. You've seen like when they've gotten it going, and they had a slow start against Maryland and some other games, when they started to like let it rip a little bit more downfield and throw a little more consistently and push it downfield, that's when it started to work. I mean, once they got Marvin Harrison really rolling in that Maryland game, he was able to take over, and Cade Stover at tight end was able to put up a few big plays. So I'm kind of with you. I think they have been trying to, again, like lead on that mantra of like, we're a physical team. We can play this way, but it's like, well, like do what you do still, I think.
It's like college football. Like we like to get on here and say all these crazy numbers. College football is a simple sport, and you guys have heard me say it a lot. Like get the football to your playmakers. You have the best, arguably the best player in college football in Marvin Harrison Jr. Go get the football to him. And I think when you saw Kyle McCord at his best, the 2-minute drill, when he had to go score points against Notre Dame, that's kind of what I'm looking for. Like Kyle McCord, I think, can do it. I think Ryan Day has been really, I don't know if stubborn's the right word, but he wants to get that run game going. And I don't know if it's because he doesn't trust Kyle McCord, or I don't know if he just wants to have a physicality this team. But to win a game against Penn State, you're talking about end of November against Michigan or in the college football playoffs, it's going to have to go through Kyle McCord and these wide receivers. And that's kind of what I'm looking Ohio State to do. Another thing I want to like, the running back room is really interesting. Like is TreVeyon Henderson going to be back? I think he's by far the best running back in this room. And if they want to run the football as much as they have wanted to do the first half of the season, kind of interested to see how that running back room plays out a little bit.
Well, I was going to say, like, and people are getting on this Ohio State rushing attack to an extent.
Yes.
I've heard like guys like Joel Klatt say their offensive line, they got to block a little better. And there are some things that are true to that. I think they do need to get up 100%. To the second level. And again, they're not giving up a ton of negative plays, but I think without TreVeyon Henderson on the field, they're not really reeling off big runs. But I will say that's the difference. It's like you take off a guy like TreVeyon Henderson and he's not playing in a game like against Maryland, let's say. They do run the ball less effectively. And I think at the end of the day, you're right. When TreVeyon Henderson plays, this rushing attack looks a whole lot different.
People forget that he's one of the best running backs in the country. Like what he did as a true freshman, it's still like one of the more impressive freshman running back performances ever. He's banged up last year. Healthy TreVeyon Henderson is legitimate
like a different level of explosiveness and burst hole where he doesn't need a gaping hole. I mean, he can hit them quickly. He can run through arm tackles with very smoothly, and he just is again. Chip Trayanum's come in and give him good minutes for sure as like that number 2. It feels like he's solidified himself there, but there is a step between him and.
I mean, you're telling I was 12 months ago, maybe 18 months ago, off season of last year. It was like Bijan Robinson, Travion Henderson. I think Travion Henderson is just as good. Now, maybe I was a little overzealous there, but that kind of tells you how high I was on Travion Henderson, what he did as a freshman. Dill, my biggest concern, this Ohio State offensive line going up against a Penn State defense that it has been so good. I mean, 8.2 points per game, that's number 2 in the country. Only 3.2 yards per play, that's number 1 in the country. But where I want to focus on is this front 7 and Manny Diaz and how creative he can get with these blitz packages. Going up against, if you have a question, and we said this in the offseason about Ohio State in that offense, it's not the quarterback, it's not the wide receiver, it's not what this passing attack is going to look like. It's the offensive line. This Penn State defensive line, if they're going to win this football game, I think they got to whoop up on this Ohio State offensive line that does still have a lot of question marks.
And that's why you kind of watch what this Penn State team does. As much as, again, when we get to their offense, you maybe think it's been a little bit bland. This defense is super creative.
Manny Diaz is one of the best defense coordinators in the country. Just say
and he does, like, they got the talent. Like, they can win with their front 4 if they need to, but he does a good job scheming up blitzes, and he just is creating havoc. I mean, you saw them take over that game against Illinois and force 5 turnovers. Like, they're just playing at that, like, stifling level right now that, again, for Ohio State, they're going to need to – again, that's kind of why I think they need to put the ball a little bit in McCord's hands, because if they let this game – again, kind of Penn State come attack them, I think that can be a real problem, because I don't think their offensive line is totally equipped to deal with that. You saw Maryland be able to put a little bit of pressure on them.
You see it in the number. You see it on the film for Penn State, and you see it in the numbers, right? You watch the film of Penn State, and you're like, this front 7 playing with their hair on fire, causing a lot of problems. 14% sack rate. I mean, 14% of quarterbacks dropbacks, opposing quarterbacks dropbacks, Penn State stacking the quarterback. That's number 2 in the country. You look at the hurry rates. Chop Robinson, 10-plus hurries. Danny Dennis-Sutton, 10-plus hurries. Abdul Carter, Dissa Isaac, getting the job done. They got so many guys who can create havoc. I mean, that's going to be the battle that I have my eyes on, is this Ohio State offensive line against this Penn State front 7. Then you go to the secondary. Elite back there, too. A 51% completion percentage to opposing quarterbacks, number 1 in the country. For only 4.9 yards per pass, number 1 in the country. They're like, guys, Johnny Dixon, Kalen Kin, Daquan Hardy's been playing really good. You talk about the matchup with that defensive line in front 7 against Ohio State's offensive line. I'm also excited for this secondary going up against what we think is the best wide receiver room in the country with Ohio State.
And that's kind of why you're just like looking forward to this game. You got 2 units that are just I mean, this Penn State defense is like, they played really well last year. They've really taken up a notch. It feels like they're playing, again, a second year with Manny Diaz. And we've talked about that. When you get your second year with your D coordinator, same thing with Ohio State and Jim Knowles. It does feel like you ramp it up a little bit, and I think Penn State's playing really well. I'm just kind of interested. I'm kind of trying to think of how Ohio State's got to attack this unit. And
I do have one thing I want to know. With Emeka Egbuka, his health, you have some question marks. Like, we were like, all right, Marvin Harrison Jr., we know he's the guy. Who's the number 2 and 3? Man, some true freshmen stepping up. Carnell Tate, I think, went for 80 yards against Purdue. Carnell Tate has similar vibes to Marvin Harrison Jr.'s freshman year, where he couldn't really get to the lineup because it was so deep. But, man, when he's called upon, like Marvin Harrison Jr. was in the Rose Bowl, like, that dude can play. And I think he's going to make some plays against Penn State. Now, flipping the side, very similar story. Like, Penn State's offense has been solid, but I don't think it's reached its peak going against the Ohio State defense that, again, people want to talk about Marvin Harrison Jr., Kyle McCord, Ryan Day. This Ohio State defense has been nailed. Looking at this Penn State offense first, I'm thinking about Drew Aller, and like, can we push the ball down the field and hit some of those explosive plays? You know he has the arm talent to do it. You haven't really seen that, though, from this Penn State offense yet.
Well, and that's the concern. And I get that was a really odd question that reporter asked James Franklin. He told him just chuck it down the field or whatever he said. And obviously James Franklin has his famous answer to it. But the spirit of the point is probably somewhat like they do need to try to open this up, because I'm looking at these stats. It's like their yards per play, like yards per pass, yards per run are very mediocre, and they've been playing teams that are far inferior to what they are. And that is the one concern I have is you have the quarterback who has that sort of arm that you've been waiting for almost 10 years now, it feels like, at Penn State. And they're using a lot of the one thing that's really working is hitting the middle of the field with their tight ends. They got to find some way, I think, to get the ball to the boundary with their wide receivers and just open this game up, because frankly, I think that helps their rushing attack too. That also hasn't really hit enough big plays. So that's just, to me, they're not chunking the ball very consistently. They're kind of staying on schedule and doing their thing.
There's an argument that that's their offense. Like, that's what they want to do, kind of similar to what we see.
That's like okay against teams that are inferior to them, and that's who they've been playing.
You don't think they could beat Ohio State doing that kind of offense where they're just staying on schedule?
You can't hit anything above 20 yards at any point. That, like, you've seen why Ohio State has been such a good offense for such a long time, is they have tools in their bag to go get 30 yards like that. It's just right now you haven't quite seen that really since week 1 for Penn State, and that's what I'm looking for. Because again, I think if they're going to go reach their peak and be a national championship team, which I think can be, I think somehow they got to find ways to get the ball outside and do something.
They got to force teams to kind of cover that whole field. Like, when you're running your offense just like inside of the 20 yards off the line of scrimmage, like, it makes it a lot easier for defenses to kind of wrap you up. Now, make no mistake, Penn State wants to run the football, one of the best offensive lines, 2 really good running backs. But I'm kind of echoing your point. You look at the numbers. I mean, Drew Aller's only attempted 12 throws, 20 yards plus down the field. And he's been damn good. He hasn't thrown an interception. He's 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions on the year.
We've also seen him make those throws in the West Virginia game. He had a couple that throw to lead up the sideline in the Illinois game. It's like when they put the ball in his hands and given him the shot to do it, he's got that type of arm. He throws an unbelievably nice, like, ball with a lot of velocity down the field.
He can rip it. Like, I mean, his arm talent he's dripping with arm talent. And I guess that's the story of the game. Like, yes, you don't go away from your identity. You want to run the football. You want to be physical. But when you force Ohio State maybe to kind of put some bodies in the box, maybe similar to the Michigan game we saw, hey, we're going to walk into safety, try to deal with this run game, play action, work the ball, and hit some of those explosive plays. That's probably the key to the game for Penn State. Now, getting to this Ohio State defense, similar story. You talk about Penn State having one of the best defenses in the country. Dill, I think Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, top 3 defenses in the country in terms of points per game. The Natty runs through the big time. Let's get that straight. 10.2 points per game, number 3 in the country. Only 3.9 yards per play. That's number 2 in the country. Dill, this Ohio State defense, and we said it heading into the season, it's loaded with NFL talent. And you look at this front 7 only allowing 3.2 yards per carry, but I want to talk about the secondary. Denzel Burke playing like a true All-American. Teams are going at him. He's faced 31 targets, only giving up 24 catches, or 12 catches, excuse me. You look at this Ohio State defense, very similar story. It's hard. It's going to be tough sledding for Penn State to move the football against this group.
Yeah, and they're going to need to grind them out. And to me, what I think's been the big thing about Ohio State is their secondary is tackling. They've been tackling, especially at the safety spot. And that, honestly, you think about what went wrong for Ohio State on defense last year. It was a couple of big plays in a couple of games. And again, safeties, both in the issue with the pass game was obvious, but even run support, I felt like they were missing tackles, not filling holes. I've been watching Ransom and Proctor both playing at a really, really high level in making tackles like around the line of scrimmage. So they're not giving up the big play at all, like what they did last year. And again, it goes back to, we kind of figured they'd get better at that. Maybe they made a couple of mistakes with Jim Knowles last year. They've cleaned a lot of that up. And now, because again, if you take what they've done for the last 2 years and just minus 10 plays, probably.
They were elite. Yeah, it's like 10 plays between the Michigan and Georgia game where it got them. And then
the only thing I'm looking for Ohio State going forward is I think JT and Sawyer on the edge can dominate games. Like they haven't, I don't think we've seen like the JT level he was playing against at Ohio or Penn State last year. That was
I can't see my notes. That's exactly what I have. Like if there's one, this Ohio State defense has been dominant. If there is one part of this defense that can put them over the top, it's Jack Sawyer, JTT, kind of being those guys, like the Bosa brothers, Chase Young. And I'm not necessarily saying they need to be Chase Young or the Bosa brothers, but kind of get towards that game-wrecking ability. You've seen flashes of it. We talk about Penn State sack rate, 14%. Ohio State, only 4%. Like Ohio State is leaving some on the bone, the meat on the bone in terms of rushing the passer. That's what I'm looking for Ohio State. Can those edge rushers and guys like Michael Hall Jr. in the inside who've been really good impact this game? They'll get into the pick. Penn State heading on the road to Columbus, 5.5-point dogs. Who are you riding with here?
I'm not going to lie. I think picking this side is brutally difficult because I'm looking, frankly, I think Penn State, in terms of what they're going to do and how fast they play, I think are going to give Ohio State's offensive line a ton of trouble. And again, we just haven't seen Kyle McCord take a game over in the way we used to see like CJ Stroud and some of those guys. So I think I'm still waiting to see that top end elite quarterback play for Penn State, or Ohio State, I should say, that's taken them over the edge in these games. And then frankly, on the other side, if not now, when, like, you got to see something explosive out of this Penn State team because they're just not going to be able to like chunk their way down the field 3 to 5 yards against Ohio State. They're just way too good for that. They're going to create a couple of negative plays. So I think this game's going to be super low scoring. I think my lean is Ohio State, frankly. But
you're sitting on the fence there. I was going to make you push. So
I'm going to say Ohio State just because, and that's almost like a history play. It's hard to say. I think right now, I think the team's probably a little bit more talented, and I think they have a little bit more offensive firepower they can just create right now. But I think this game's going to be super low scoring and really tough to call.
Yeah, this is, I mean, 100% tough to call. And in years past, you lean Ohio State because they had that elite quarterback, right? Whether it was CJ Stroud or Justin Fields, like that quarterback that you could trust to win the game when it matters. Now, I'm not saying you can't trust Kyle McCord because you saw him do it against Notre Dame, but are you trusting this Ohio State offense as much as you've trusted previous Ohio State offenses? No. I think Ohio State can win this game, but I'm taking Penn State to cover the points here. And I'm with you. Like, this is going to be a grind you out game. I could see this game kind of being inside of a touchdown. A field goal wins this game late. Penn State's defense is no joke, and you haven't really seen that Ohio State offense that's Death Star yet. And you might see it, and I might be wrong. And Ryan Day is noted for that, like turning into a Death Star like that. You could see it. You haven't seen it yet. I think you saw it close to Purdue, but this ain't no Purdue defense they're playing against Penn State. Give me Penn State in the points. This is going to be a good one. Cannot wait for it. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing. 17 minutes still. Long one. This is going to get a lot of talking points here. Appreciate y'all rocking with the fellas, and we'll talk to you guys later. Peace.